Hi, this is Umair. I'm back with another AngularJS tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to make a simple application, simple item listing application. As you can see on my screen that there are 3 items right now in the list, and what we can do is we can add a new item. So let's say we have Amber.js and I will add it and it will be added into that list. Let's say we want to add JavaScript as well, and anything we want to add into that list, we can do it with this input text box. Alright, and when we want to remove that item, any particular item from the list, we can do it by just clicking on the cross icon. Okay, I'm clicking on the cross icon and I can delete that particular item. So let's do it. I'm going to write its HTML and CSS within few minutes so that you may know that how to implement its UI, and then after that I will show you how to make this working with AngularJS, and you will see that how easy it is with AngularJS as compared to JavaScript or jQuery or any other library. Okay, now let's go. I'm using WebStorm, or you can use other IDEs as well. I have created empty project. It contains nothing, and what I'm gonna do is first I'm gonna create an HTML file, index.html, and I'm gonna create a style file. Alright, so first of all let's write some HTML, and that is Angular app. Alright, and come to the body and add a div element and give it a class of main. Alright, and inside this div element we want a heading. Alright, so let's add h1, and inside it let's add items list. Alright, and under the heading we have a text box and a button. So let's add div, give it a class of add item, and inside that div let's add input tag, and it has a placeholder add item, and it has to be a class of add text. Alright, and after that I need to have a button, and it should have add inside it. Alright, and now let's come out, and after that div we need to have a list. So let's add a UL tag. Inside it we have a list item. Alright, and with the list item we need to have a cross button. Okay, cross icon. So I will write span and I will press X inside it. Alright, let's go and run it and check it. So we have this thing right now. Alright, I'm going to bring all those items from the model. Alright, but for now I'm just going to add some list items in it. A, B, triple A. Okay, so let's do it. So now let's go and write some CSS to convert this item, this UI like this. Okay, so now let's go to CSS, and first of all I need to have a main. Its width should be 500 pixels, text align should be center, margin has to be 0 auto, border has to be 2 pixels solid, and D7 a dark gray color, not too much darker. So it has to be a margin top 20 pixels, and font family has to be sans serif. Okay, so let's see if we have those items in the center. Alright, so are not on the center right now, so actually I need to add a reference to it. Link rel style sheet and add a reference. Href equals to style. Alright, now let's save it and reload it. You can see that it has come to the center of the page. Now let's go to the style, and after that we need to add a style to the individual items inside the main div element. So for the h1 I will write text align center, background color has to be D4 and D4. Alright, and padding has to be 30 pixels and 0 pixels. I want a padding from the top and bottom, so margin top has to be 0 pixels. Alright, now for the UL, we don't need those dots before each list item. Font size have to be 20 pixels. Color okay, let's say it is this. Okay, we have a margin left minus 40 pixels. We have margin bottom, this has to be 0 pixels. And next we have li tag, and it has to have a border at the bottom, so 1 pixel solid, and the border color should be gray color. Alright, so background color has to be F4, F4 and F4. Padding 10 pixels and 0 pixels. Margin bottom 5 pixels. Alright, so what we have now, we have a span tag inside the UL tag. Alright, so let's add li span. Its cursor should be pointer, position should be relative, float right, and margin right should be 10 pixels. Alright, so we have a class add item. We also need to add some CSS for that, but before that let's go and check out. So guys, you can see that how well it is looking, but we need to do something more, because we need to increase its width and height and give it some styles as well. Okay, so now it has a class add item and it has a class add text. Alright, and we also need to add a style for button. So let's go and write add item. It has a position relative, padding bottom 0, and height has to be 30 pixels. Alright, and next we had add text. Width has to be 80%. Alright, it has gone 80%, and height has to be 30 pixels. Alright, now add item button. Button has to have some height and width, so height has to be 30 pixels, 35 pixels, and width have to be 50 pixels. Alright, now let's go and check it out a bit. So we have the styling, text box and a button. This is already styled. What we need to do, we need to write some Angular and fetch the data from the model from the backend so that this looks pretty well. Alright, so now what I want to do is I want to remove this list item and I want to bring this pen element inside this list item. Alright, because I want this cross button should be a part of that list item. If I click on it, you can see that it is on the right side and this item on the center. Alright, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go and get the AngularJS CDN. Alright, I'll click right here and we should have a CDN for fetching the AngularJS file. Now I will copy this line and I will paste this line right here inside the body element, and this is the actual angular.min.js file that we need in order to execute Angular code. Alright, you can also download only this file, but you need to put that file inside your project and add the reference of that file from your project. Alright, but right now I'm not doing, I'm just fetching Angular file from the CDN. Okay, so let's right click on the project and create our script file. Alright, and before writing code for the script file, let's add a reference for the script file. Okay, so we have added a reference. Alright, now let's go and create some model and controller. If you already know Angular, then it's good for you, but if you don't know, then I'm going to explain you each and everything that I'm going to write inside this file. Alright, so Angular is composed of a framework called MVC, stands for Model View Controller. It means that we need to create a controller, a module, and inside the module we need to have a controller that belongs to any particular model. And in order to bind the data of that model with the UI, in our case that is HTML, we need to first ask the controller, and the controller is responsible for fetching the data from the model and bring it back to the UI. Alright, so this is the two-way. Now we need to define a module. Every application should have a module. A module consists of controller and models. Okay, so in order to create module, we need to write Angular.module. Alright, and inside it we need to write the name of module, and after comma we need to define some dependencies. Right now we don't have any dependencies, so we leave this array empty array. Now I will get the reference of that module inside a variable called my app, and I'm going to create I can create many directives, I can create services, I can create filters, I can create a routing controllers with the help of this variable. Alright, because this is a module. So my app dot controller. Alright, and I will enter the name of my controller. Alright, and after that I will have a function with a parameter scope. Alright, so we have defined our controller. So before proceeding further, let's go back and define our module and controller inside our HTML. So for defining the module inside our HTML, we have a directive ng-app. Alright, and inside it we need to write the name of that module. In our case, this is my list. So let's enter it. So now we need to have a controller as well, and let's add the name of that controller. Alright, we don't need uh, to define the module and controller on the same element. Alright, but we can define the controller in the child elements of the module element. Alright, but we can't define a controller outside this module. Okay, so in our case it is not a requirement that we need to define this controller inside this element. So I have defined both the things on the same element. Okay, so now just for showing you the actual thing, let's add, just write what I'm writing. I'm gonna explain you what I'm doing. Okay, so React.js, and the last one has to be _JS. Let's change it to double quotes. So what it's doing, all right, it is defining a variable items that is referring to an array. Array contains three elements, three string elements, but we have defined the items variable with the keyword $scope. All right, so what it means is if we want to bind this variable to any of these elements, we can directly bind that element with this, because I have defined the controller to this element. So every variable or every function that I'm going to define within this controller can be binding to any of the elements of the controller element. Alright, because all these elements are the children of this controller element. So we can bind each and every variable that we define inside it to any of these elements. Alright, I hope you have got it, but let me write more for your better understanding. So what we need now, I need to have a scope dot new item equals to empty. Alright, so I'm not going to implement the add item or remove item right now. Let's bind this list, alright, so that it may show up into that list. Okay, so in order to bind that list to this list item, we need to use some directives that Angular already provide us. Alright, so in order to bind that, we need to apply a loop on that list. Alright, because this list item has to be iterating, because we have three list item and later on we might have 4, 5 or unlimited elements inside this array. Alright, so we need to iterate this list item. We can't keep on copying and pasting this list item as much time as there are items. So there is a directive called ngRepeat. Alright, and inside ngRepeat, let's add a variable, and this variable should have a value that is inside items. Alright, this is the items. Okay, and this is an A, it should have the value of individual items. Okay, so in order to bind it with a value, I can just write I, because this ngRepeat will fetch individual item one by one and store that individual item in this variable, and we can then bind this variable and show its value with the help of two curly braces. Alright, so first time when it will run, it will show this value, second time it will show this value, third time it will show _JS. Alright, so for the span, now let's go and check out if it works. So guys, you can see that it has it has been iterating through that items array, and it has been binded with the HTML element that we have just done it. Alright, it has shown the value right here, but we also need to apply some click event that whenever this X button clicks, that item should have removed. But I'm not going to do right now. First I need to implement the add item thing. Okay, so for the add item, what I need to do is first of all I want to bind this element with this variable, because whenever a user will enter any of the value in this text box, that should be inside this variable. Alright, so what I can do is, in order to bind this input element with this variable, I can use ng model. This is a directive, and I can add new item. So now this has been binded to this variable. Just to show you the what do I mean by it, so I'm just going to show you the value that user will enter inside this input tag. So I'm just going right here, click here, and as I am writing this, you can see that as I'm writing inside this input element, its value is being binded and showing inside this, under this input text box. Okay, because I just entered and binded that variable under that button element. Alright, so we have binded this ng model. Now we need to click on add button, and once we click on add button, it should be popped up, it should be pushed inside this item. So for that, first we need to create a function. Alright, and the name of function should be scope.pushItem equals to. Alright, so whenever this button will be clicked, it should call this function. So we need to bind this function on the click event of this button. Alright, so in order to bind it on this, what we can do is we can use ng click equals to the name of that function, push item, with the brackets. Alright, now let's come inside it, and in order to push that item inside this items, we can just write items dot, actually I need to write scope first. Whenever we want to use pre-existing variable, we need to start with scope. We can't just start writing the variable name. So push, and it has to have item. Okay, scope dot new item, and after it has entered and pushed inside items array, we need to empty that new item variable. So scope dot new item equals to empty. We also need to check if user doesn't push empty element. Alright, so first we need to check if scope dot new item is not equals to empty, then execute this piece of code. Alright, so we know that when this button will be clicked, this function will execute, and this function will change this items array, and whenever this items array will be changed, it will be automatically be notified to this ng repeat, and it will redraw all those elements, because it will know that items have been changed, and it is going to redraw all those elements. Alright, so let's save it and reload it, and what I'm gonna do is I'm going to enter A, B, C, and I'm click on add button. You can see that it has added, and I'm going to enter another thing. Let's add JavaScript, and if I click on add button, you can see that it has been added. I haven't implemented right now that cross button implementation, so let's do it. Alright, so we need to bind this pan element to this cross button. So for that we need to have ng click, and we need to have a function inside this controller, so that if we click on this X button, that function should be executed. Alright, so the name of that function would be, let's say, delete item. Alright, and let's come right here and create a function delete item. Alright, but for now we need to send an index that which item have been clicked. Alright, if this have been clicked or this has been clicked, we need to know. Alright, so for that we need to send a variable called index. This is an Angular variable, and that will show that which item have been clicked. Alright, and this X is belong to which particular item. So we are sending that index, and right here we need to receive that index as well. Alright, and if you know some JavaScript, you should know that there are different functions that we need to, if we want to remove any element from the array, we can just remove it. So scope.items dot, there is a function called slice. Alright, and we need to pass an index and how many items we want to remove. Alright, so this function will be called if we click on this X button. Now let's save it and go right here, reload it. Okay, and first I need to remove this React.js, and I'll click on it. It is not calling that function. First of all, let's press F12 and see if there is no error. There is no error. So we need to check out that where we are wrong. So actually this is delete item. The I of item is capital, so we need to replace it with delete item. Okay, now let's save it and reload it. Now I'll click on this cross button. It is still not removing. So guys, actually the problem was right here. It is not slice, but it is splice. So I need to add a P inside it. Alright, so now I'll save it and I'll go to the browser and reload it. Now if I click right here, you can see that it's gone. If I click again, it's gone again. If I want to add a new item, I can add it. Let's add a new item and we can add it. And if I click on it, you can see that all those items are getting gone. Alright, so I hope that you have got the idea how to bind these variables with the individual elements using ng model, and how to apply click event using ng click directive, and how to bring the list or a collection from that model and bind that using ng repeat. Alright, so I hope that you have liked it. Make sure to subscribe my channel and share it if you can. That will really encourage me to make more videos related to AngularJS or other JavaScript frameworks. I hope that you have liked it. Thanks for watching this video.